Welcome to the Sharpcast, where we will talk about puppies and all things nice.
Get that shit out of here, motherfucker! Sharpcast, make your brain blast! Political conversations don't let you think! Yes, Sharpcast, it'll make your brain blast! Come and sit down and have a civil debate!
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Sharpcast Heated. I am extremely happy to see my wonderful, wonderful audience being wonderful, wonderful people as usual. And all right, you were going to say something, Helios?
I said we all are.
We all are. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
This is our country.
Mm-hmm.
And,
it is our country.
And today, this wonderful episode of the Sharpcast is brought to you by Scarlet Rose's shredded chicken street tacos with homemade salsa. Yes, I will have a link to that, Gonzo.
Okay. So,
all right. So let's by the way, when we talk about shredded chicken, they're not talking about me. Just want to point that out there, okay? Because I have a lot of people trying to confuse me, whether willingly or otherwise, with the chicken. But nonetheless, I digress. So,
I mean, if Scarlet cooked you probably would just regenerate because a phoenix rises from the ashes.
Look, just because I can come back from the dead doesn't mean I like it. All right,
All right.
All right. So let's get going here. As usual, we got a lot to do and not a lot of time to do it. So,
all right. Speaking of bringing shit back from the dead, how about Biden's attempt in order to get this fucking shit back up and running?
Right.
It's been about 30 days since he took office. What do we think?
Well, I've always said is that it's been interesting. First of all, whenever you want to judge how an administration is doing, unless things are going seriously off the fucking rails right from the get-go, like we had with the previous administration, 30 days is usually too soon of a time to really pass judgment because, things are still settling in, things that look like are broken or unfulfilled promises could just be things that are in the pipeline but haven't materialized yet. Generally speaking, the proper point to kind of look at an administration and measure it, see how they're doing so far, is 100 days in. With that said, it's been very interesting watching this particular administration because very rarely throughout the history of this country has a president come in and immediately have had a massive critical situation to deal with. And granted, COVID is just one of many critical situations Biden's have to deal with. Like I've said before, the previous president has left Biden a full bowl. I'm not talking about a punch bowl here, okay? So it's been very interesting watching Biden focus on COVID and really the kind of response to it. I mean, we've already gotten the vaccine production ramping up. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine just got emergency authorization from the FDA as well. So now we got 3 vaccines that can be distributed to the public. They are predicting that by May, we may be at a point where almost every adult in America could be vaccinated if everything goes well, which is fantastic. I mean, people are I know that there's all this talk about how, oh my God, we're going to be wearing masks until next year and gloom and doom. And that's certainly going to be the guidelines from the CDC. And if you are vaccinated, you probably still should take efforts to at least wear masks for a while, because even if you can't get sick, you can still get somebody else sick. But if by May, and I remember I talked about in this program before, May for me is like my target date of when we can kind of start gradually, slowly easing ourselves back into normalcy, with the hope that by the time we get to September, everything's going to be mostly appear to be back to the way it was. I mean, let's put it another way, okay? If September rolls around and we're still dealing with serious outbreaks of this virus, something has gone wrong. Something has gone very wrong. But if we can get most adults vaccinated by May or June, we're going to be in a really, really good spot. And that's what we're on track to be doing right now. The vaccine production is doing well. The rollout could be better in some cases. Like, for example, in my home state of Michigan, it looks like I'm not going to get the vaccine until maybe July. I would like to get it a little bit sooner, maybe within the next month or so, if at all possible. I mean, I understand if I can't, but, and we can have a conversation as to whether or not the right people are getting vaccinated. But the point is that we are getting vaccinated, and things are going well in that regard. Yeah, unfortunately, it seems that there are some people out there that, for the sake of political points or trying to wage a super culture war, might fuck things up, if not for the country, then for their own neck of the woods. And that brings us.
Are we talking about the kind of people who are trying to pose as like elderly people to get vaccinated, or are we talking about the anti-vaxxers and the people who just don't believe in wearing masks and shit like that?
A little bit of both, because when it comes to who gets the vaccination first, there's been a lot of consternation, a lot of hand-wringing, because I know that people really on both sides of the aisle seem to be a little bit irritated that the various politicians in D.C. got the vaccination first. In fact, we learned a couple days ago that the previous president and his wife actually got the vaccine on January 18th, which is like,
That one for me is a little difficult because, as you'll recall, I'd specifically required it that if people were really worried the vaccine was poisonous or dangerous or that it wasn't safe, the people putting themselves at risk should have been the people mandating it, which is what happened. Because the politicians were the very first people to be vaccinated. If this shit was going to turn you into a zombie, they were going to be like fucking Raccoon City over there.
Oh, God, yeah, don't remind me. And like I've said on this program is that's one of the perks of being in a high position of government, okay? Because the vaccination there is for the sake of continuity of government, okay? It's the reason why in the event of a nuclear war, the houses of Congress and the president will head over to Raven's Rock and sip cold beers while the rest of us are scrambling to get into our local vaults. Yeah, that's just the way things work.
I look at it on the flip side because I was unsure. Like, the way this vaccine was established with stem cells and all that different kind of stuff, dependent on who was establishing the vaccine, they were all using experimental methods to create this vaccine that hadn't been tried with other previously made vaccines. And how about the fact that these vaccines in particular had to be refrigerated at extremely cold temperatures in order to maintain them? Like, other vaccines have not had this level of fragility.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of logistical challenges in getting involved with this vaccine. And by the way, the appointments that Biden has made to Health and Human Services have confirmed that the previous administration, as I predicted on this program, the previous administration did not have any plans for distributing the vaccine. There was no plan at all. Nothing.
They pumped fucking money into getting it like fucking made, but how to get it out? On their own.
I've heard so many stories about like how Trump did have a plan, or so many petty flip side things established. Like Helios, when you talked about how Trump fired the staff before Biden got there, everybody else was viewing as, well, Biden did say everybody who had any kind of ties or association with Trump had to go. Like, that was how they viewed it.
Well, in reality, of course, it's Trump just trying to play fuck around. But
was that from their perspective, Biden accidentally fired the entire White House staff? Yeah. So the way this is being spun is like it's difficult, right? Because on the flip side, if you're somebody like me or you're skeptical. But if you're the average person, you look at that, it's not out of the realm of possibility that such a thing could occur. Therefore, it sounds rational. And I've noticed a lot of these arguments are produced from that stuff and are highly dependent on the masses being uninformed, which they are, very uninformed. They don't even know, half of them don't even know what an R naught is. Well, we did like a fucking poll on how many people actually knew what to do in a pandemic, knew about how viruses work, and like, what was it? It was like, it was a really, really low percentile in the United States alone that were educated on what to do during a pandemic or epidemic. And then the number of people trained in CPR is pretty low too.
I actually was
CPR
trained in
certified.
CPR when I was in high school. I don't know
Yeah.
how many people can say the same, but I actually did get a a CPR training there. I don't know how much of that is there now, but
To say the least, some of being prepared was a little bit unreasonable in the time frame people were given, which was like, be medically studied. Unless you were going to Harvard Medicine, in that time period, you probably didn't have enough knowledge about the virus.
well, yeah, and it's like I've said. Okay, so one of the things that that really has kind of annoyed me throughout this pandemic is all the people, whenever people are saying that, oh, the lockdowns don't work, they're unconstitutional, whatever, they always try to phrase it as, what is the data that you're using to make these decisions? And on one hand, yeah, fair enough. You want to know what exactly our leaders are being told that is leading them to make these choices. But on the other hand, when you're asking for the exact data that decided that your favorite Red Robin needs to close at a time when our knowledge about this virus, it's still incomplete, I mean, it's a bad faith argument, okay? Because we have a better picture about this virus than we did a year ago, but we still know how it works now. Not to mention, it's mutating very, very fast. We've got the British variant, which the vaccine works against, but it's a lot more contagious. The South African variant, rather, which the vaccine may not work against. And as we said last week, apparently there's reports out of California that these two variants are combining and becoming like one super variant.
There's also
And-
the possibility
and
of
with
a
that
New York
knowledge-
mutant happening now.
With that knowledge, I've seen the most extreme suggestion that we should just throw everything away and like give up.
Well,
And, like,
thankfully,
it was like, ooh, I try in these conversations not to explode at people. But
I mean,
then that part of me comes like, well, maybe if you wore them.
I mean, I have seen that argument a couple of times, and it's like, I've only ever seen it literally a couple of times, because usually when whenever you hear someone arguing for the end of the lockdowns, they always phrase it in like some frame of like, what about my freedoms? What about my rights? What about the other ones? Only a couple of times have I seen people say, we shouldn't try to stop this virus because we just need to die because we're a terrible species as humanity.
I literally made the argument of everybody's for population control until you drag in the people that actually mean something to them and say, hey, if you make this choice, they will die and you can't prevent it.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you add in that factor, their song and dance changes.
I mean, people who want to, and I've taught this before, is that people who say, well, we should be able to take a risk, you fail to generalize that risk, okay? Because
what are you risking?
You don't live in a bubble. You can't live in a bubble. Even if you know, like, take me for example, okay? My next door neighbor has the virus. He was exposed to it at work. He tested positive. The only thing that is now separating me from this virus that has killed 500,000 Americans are 2 brick walls and about 10 feet of grass. That's it.
One of my Trump supporter friends had actually wound up getting corona, but because it only acted like a small cold for him because he was a young fella, he essentially used that to reinforce the idea that this virus isn't all that dangerous, that it's not a big deal, that people have fluffed it up, that it's exaggerated, and depends in what context you're talking about it. See, the problem there is he's not 100% wrong, and that's what I hate.
Well,
It's just how he produces the argument and under what nature he produces it is wrong.
well, here's the thing, okay? So, this is what I would say to him. You got the virus and you were mostly okay. Okay, great, good for you. What happens if you give it to someone who's not going to be okay with it? What happens if you give it to someone who's immunocompromised or whose immune system isn't up to snuff, and that puts them in the hospital? Okay, because I've had a couple of friends of mine that are my age that they've gotten the virus. Okay, one of them actually got it from his parents, who got it from his grandparents, his grandmother. The grandmother is no longer with us. My friend is okay. Like, he lost his sense of smell and taste and everything. I mean, it definitely wasn't the flu for him, but he came through okay. But his grandmother died. So that's kind of where my position has always been. If I get this virus, I'm going to be okay. But I don't want to get someone else sick, because every new case of every new case of the virus is a new vector of infection in the world. Okay, it's another reason why the economy's fucked up. Another way for somebody old or vulnerable to die.
Yeah, my whole situation with this whole thing is like, well, it only affects old people. Like, no, like, that's not 100% true. It does not help, however, that the facts being disseminated to the public, to some degree, because the media was being selective about what they showed at times, or about how they talked about it. Because let's face it, right? We learned very quickly that your average mom and pop journalists over at Sinclair don't really have a clue what they're talking about either. Now, many Sinclair broadcasts did not try to downplay the virus, but you could tell they did not fucking understand how this thing worked.
No.
And when it came to their general incompetence, it made the situation look like a joke.
And then you have cases like Fox, where they deliberately spread misinformation to the point that they almost certainly got people killed based on what they were telling people.
No doubt. And there's my problem, right? When we're talking about Fox, we're talking about low-hanging fruit. The primary thing I've not been seeing people talk about is the big deal. The outlier where most of your normies or average people will disseminate their information from, which is local news. And we haven't talked about the blunders of Sinclair. We haven't talked about the blunders of even your local newspaper when talking about this virus. We haven't talked about how fucking National Geographic fucking fearmongered the coronavirus instead of informing people correctly about it.
Well, that's a whole different story, and I would argue that local news is kind of a thing of the past, in a sense, because if you look, not a lot of people still have local newscasts, and the ones that do just tend to be repeats of whatever the major networks are carrying at the time.
Yeah, like
that's
essentially Sinclair Broadcasting, except for the must-run stories. That's about it.
Yeah, there's been a steep decline in local news over the last decade or so, and it has been to the detriment of this country because, for one thing, you miss out on important local political issues because, as I've said, the most important politics are local politics.
Yes.
And as a result, because of that, instead of people, taking up important issues in their own states, they're flipping out over representatives and senators that they do not vote for, that they will never vote for. And
not only that, but I started to realize this, Helios, because it was like brought up in the previous podcast how the big problem with academia is a feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
Journalism has that same problem because they'll contact a colleague that contacts a colleague that contacts a colleague that contacts a colleague, and they'll write a story based off what that other colleague says, but then never question where the colleague got that information from, or why the colleague is saying those particular things. And what I'm kind of learning is through the death of local news and more established international news, you essentially get a handful of people that, no offense, while they sometimes deliver the facts, have more of a genuine concern with circle jerking and huffing their own farts with each publication they write.
Yeah. So, with all that in mind, let's go ahead and talk about what's going on down in Texas, which we're bringing up a lot in this in this podcast as of late. Probably more than I think any of us expected to ever talk about Texas, at least until next year when the midterms come around. So, Governor Greg Abbott made an announcement that they were not going to bother waiting around. They were just going to go ahead and reopen the state. All right? He made an announcement saying, listen, any business that wants to open up, go ahead and open up. And we are going to get rid of the mask mandates and so on and so forth. Let's go back to the way it was. This, in spite of the fact that Texas right now, per the latest data from our friends over at gov't now, is at serious risk for a active outbreak, and efforts to test citizens of the state and vaccinate them have been hampered because of the effects of the winter storm. And just to get an idea of where they're at right now, Texas is still sitting at about 25 cases per 100,000 people every day. Okay, so and is still pretty close to 1, and they're looking at a positive test rate of 10.5% and an ICU capacity use of 82%. Now, some would say the reason that Abbott said we should go ahead and open up is because the actual number of deaths have been going down. Like, they're actually down from a spike they had back in I
genuinely wanted to move in a direction where we can make this information more available to our audience.
Yeah.
But what sources exactly are actually corroborating the numbers in Texas?
So
right now?
gov't now is the site that I've been using to keep track of COVID trends throughout the country, really since the start of this pandemic. They do a really good job of showing you which states are at real risk for an outbreak and so on and so forth. They use their own data API, and they get their information from Georgetown, Stanford, Harvard, as well as a couple other nonprofits as well. And
right?
All right.
And
American
these guys,
warning system.
yeah, these guys by and large are pretty good. Like, they're really, really good at what they do. Like, for example, the people that, like, the National Guard uses their data, IBM uses their data.
Oh, lovely. I'm vacationing in Florida, and they've got a severe risk. I think we're going to come back with COVID.
Yeah, that's what I said. I am not going to Florida for a while now. And you'll also notice, by the way, that Texas is under a very severe risk, which makes Governor Abbott's decision to open the state rather interesting. Now, again, the governor claims that they're seeing a decline in cases and deaths. So he says that it's a reason to open the state. Here's the problem with that. Deaths are a lagging indicator. That's number one. Number two, Texas is not doing a very good job testing people, so there's concern that there's a lot of cases where you have positive cases of COVID that are going undetected, which means that as bad as the numbers are in Texas right now, the actual situation could be far worse. Okay? So when you got that going on, what we're going to see here, and there still is really no plan. They've only got 13.4% of the population has only gotten vaccinated in Texas. Like 93, like the Lincoln Project literally just put out a tweet saying 93% of people in Texas have not gotten a vaccination yet. So this is inevitably going to lead to a spike. This is going to lead to a spike. And
I do want to corroborate. Yeah, that's exactly what this COVID Act Now thing is saying.
Mm-hmm. So, opening up Texas, it's going to lead to a spike. And Abbott knows this, I think, because he just tweeted out that he's actually blaming... Well, first of all, President Biden had a comment about this. He called the decision by Governor Abbott, as well as the decision by the governor of Mississippi, I believe, to also reopen the state and forego mask mandates. He called it, and I'm using a very technical term here that only serious politicians used, he called it Neanderthal thinking. And now
You know what's
Governor-
funny? My gripe isn't that they wanted to reopen shit. My gripe is that while they were reopening all that shit, while they're at high risk for another outbreak, they also wanted to cancel the mask mandates at the exact same time.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? If you'd reopened and kept the masks, I'd have been a lot more okay with that.
But no, they don't want to, as I remember a headline from last year, Mississippi doesn't want to turn its state into communist China.
Oh, fuck off.
Yeah, I remember that.
Like I said, this was a headline I remember last year at the height of it.
Some days I
And,
want to turn
that-
Mississippi to ash. You didn't hear
Yeah.
that
Oh,
from
don't
me.
worry. They ended up at one point had a rather high infection rate. So
You know, I would say karma, but at this point, I think people are just getting fucked.
They certainly
getting
are.
fucked. Like,
And,
fuck with political theater
for
in
one,
a sense.
I would be remiss if I said each and every single person in that state wants an outbreak to happen. There are some people that are just unwillingly naive. There are other people that are 100% on board with everything we've been doing to try and curb the virus, that are now worried when their governor only cares about and listens to the people that just straight out want to fuck them. Like, period.
Yeah. And I can tell you this as well. The Daily Beast ran an article where they interviewed some service workers down in Texas about what they thought about this. This one quote comes from Travis Smith, who's a 28-year-old fast food worker in Houston. He said, "I watched Greg Abbott deliver that announcement live, and all I felt was rage. I was horrified. We just experienced this horrific winter storm that killed people. And just coming out of that and to have this announcement, workers in Houston and in Texas need more protections right now. We do not need less."
Yeah.
This is actually the portion of me that makes me like fucking hate the internet when it comes to conversation about these things. It's like, it's the same thing with the fucking winter storm, right? Oh, Texas deserved it. They voted for this. Well, really? Because it seems to me like the conversation and the dialogue that these people are trying to spark up when they're interviewed by journalists and shit like that is to say, look, I want to get back to work. I have to get back to work, but I don't want to put myself, my family, or my kids at risk.
Nobody does. But with people saying that, it doesn't make you look like a better person.
It's not unreasonable to need or want a reopening of state, especially when it becomes blatantly clear you are getting fucked left and right, and no help's coming from Fed. They're taking their sweet-ass time delivering a stimulus that you need at a constant because of the revenue you used to generate. And it just ain't going to happen. It just ain't going to happen. Our government is just that ineffective.
Yeah. But let's talk about why DeSantis, or not, well, I'm kind of spoiling you here, why Abbott wants to reopen. And it's not, I'll tell you right now, it is 99% political theater, okay? It's got nothing to do with science or anything like that. It's 99% political theater.
The reason I say
wait
that.
a minute. What?
So it wasn't enough that Texas was being left in the cold because of political theater, but now Greg Abbott wants to do political theater and kill off the rest of his constituents.
You know, as crazy as it is, and this will probably get me some backlash, Greg Abbott doesn't want to kill off his constituents. He wants to please his constituents. Because his constituents, as he's decided it, are the kinds of people that do want this shit to happen.
Like I said, the constituents,
If you're a Texan, that doesn't automatically make you a constituent of Greg Abbott, by far.
Yeah, these are the kind of people that we referred to way back at the beginning of this whole pandemic. We said their motto was, give me COVID or give me death. That's kind of what's going on here. But no, so when I say it's political theater, it's because something obviously must have motivated Greg Abbott to make this decision. There was something that happened this past weekend that may have done that. Last weekend we had the CPAC convention in Orlando, Florida. We mentioned it in the last program, and it went pretty much as you might expect. It was a mix between a cult gathering and a Nuremberg rally. the former president was there, and he gave a speech that the reaction to said speech was pretty because I think everyone realized that he basically just gives the same speech every time he goes somewhere, and I think people, even the true believers, just kind of like bored of it now.
Jesus, car
you also
reviewers aren't this fucking lazy. Jesus. And they have writers.
You also had Ted Cruz there joking about flying to Cancun, and then and then trying to do his breast William Wallace from Braveheart impression for some reason.
What a fucking shit nugget. Jesus Christ.
Yes, he is.
I fucking hate Ted Cruz.
It's even worse.
He somehow manages to be all the pussyfiedness of a suburban white male and all the shittiness of an apath.
While trying to calm off his machismo. I want to bring this back to the whole thing with Texas real quick because you're going to love this recent tweet from today. Okay, so we all know that Texans do not deserve this kind of bullshit from Abbott or any of the GOP that keeps encouraging for an opening of Texas without any sort of safety precautions because we still have COVID. We'll have long ways away from being fully recovered. Unfortunately, there are two major problems that are coming out of this. Their names are Michael Moore and Keith Olbermann. Those two are pretty much convinced that, well, if they're going to be that haphazard, why are we wasting our vaccines on them? Which in turn did not make them be... They're not painting themselves as morally superior. But
I saw that tweet by Michael Moore, and I gotta say, that fat fucker can just choke on a hot dog.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, now, I've met Michael Moore, I've spoken to Michael Moore, and I remember that I've told you guys that he told me himself that half the times he's just bullshitting and just exaggerating stuff like that, and he does things that even he doesn't agree with it. This is definitely one of those things, but it's still a really fucking poor look. Like, I saw it to him like, bad form there, Michael. Bad form indeed.
On to the Ted Cruz angle of this, real quick.
Well, for one, right?
Never mind.
You go ahead.
To the Ted Cruz angle of this little tangent, just to bring us back around to Ted Cruz again. He tried to get himself into this and try to pull off the machismo that he tries to project, despite him running off to Cancun when it got a little bit colder.
Ted,
he tried to say, okay then, Michael Moore, no jet fuel, no oil for you.
I want to point out, fucking Vladimir Putin has more machismo than Ted Cruz does.
Sharp, I think everyone on this program has more machismo than Ted Cruz.
Yeah, like even
I watched the fucking Critic like a few weeks ago. Jay Sherman has more of a machismo than Ted.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. Ted Cruz is just a fucking wuss. Like he won't go hardline on not one damn thing he fucking says. He weasels around every conversation he's ever been a part of. He pretends to support things and then he'll do a fucking bait and switch. He looks like a fucking wimp and thinks he's tough.
Yeah.
He has a fucking rag-ass haircut that does not go well with that suit.
No, it doesn't.
Yes. We also would like to remind him that here's a couple of things that I've noticed, and here are some that are recent as well. Remember, he was called the Zodiac Killer by Trump. Trump also called his wife ugly. He pretty much just stood by all of those. He tried to be machismo during the Merrick Garland hearings that were occurring also around the same time, trying to say that Merrick Garland did not answer one fucking question by anybody, despite being submitted about, they said 200 or 800 odd questions to Merrick Garland. And he answered them to the best of his ability?
I come to realize that if anybody had just threatened to beat Trump's ass, he probably would have stopped there. Because Trump, I don't think that man's ever fought once in his life. Like, I think if you actually said, hey, we're going to go out in the lobby, I'm going to punch you in the fucking face. He'd be like, whoa, we don't have to resort to violence now.
Also, let's not forget that Donald Trump accused Ted Cruz's dad of killing JFK. So,
oh yeah, because he's obviously Lee Harvey Oswald, who probably never had a child.
I'm actually surprised, as polarized as polarizing as things are, senators haven't had like fucking fists flying at each other yet.
I think there probably was.
Somebody tried to fucking fist fight in the goddamn lobby.
I mean, so far, it probably should have been. I'm surprised that it hasn't resorted to like just all that we got worst off is just screaming matches.
It's the thing, right? Screaming matches, bad enough. Somebody needs to get their ass whooped so that they can. I know, right? It breaks decorum, but two politicians at some point or another need to get into a fucking fight just to show how polarized this fucking administration is, to definitively show what the truth is right now. Mm-hmm. That we have gone solo, we have gone so petty with the attacks, we have gone, politics has always been dirty. There is no question about it. But when it gets this fucking depraved, people need to see it for what it is.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and
we might be
if that
has
to be like a fucking congressman, if that has to be a representative and a senator fist fighting in the fucking hall, then so be it. Fuck it.
Yeah. So anyway, to go back to CPAC, like I said, we're not going to talk too much about CPAC because I don't really think there's anything we could say that would make it more sensational. I mean, when you have a convention where people are literally wheeling around a golden idol of Donald Trump, I don't know what else I can say about that.
People on Twitter are already roasting about that. People are already roasting about that because Marco Rubio ended up tweeting today a verse from the Book of Psalms, and I believe it's, where are you? I'm going to scroll up because I'm trying to find it. Ah, there you are. You hate those who serve worthless idols, but I trust in the Lord. Psalms 31:7. But people are already doing our job for us, like reminding us in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not have any other gods before me. And
is it safe to say they worship Trump as a god?
It seems to, because I mean, how else do you explain it? How else do you explain McConnell just all of a sudden just saying one thing, but okay, best example during the impeachment when McConnell voted to not convict Trump, but still said Trump did some bad things and it's just unforgivable and shit. How else do you explain that?
It's just fucking K-pop stands, but with politics now.
It really is. Like I said,
it shouldn't even be. It's not. Look, the presidency should not be a popularity contest, or like it should, or basically, king and queen of homecoming. No,
the one thing I'm actually grateful for is this has been the most boring, uneventful presidency in a while.
Yeah, like I said, it's been pretty uneventful.
There has been some hit and miss with that, especially with the COVID bill, but.
We'll get to that. Again, we'll get to that in a bit. But
look, he's trying to get that Joe Menum going. All right,
the Joe Menum.
God.
Joe Mentum.
But anyways, how about we talk about that COVID bill?
But anyway, but we'll get to that in a bit. But the point I want to make about CPAC, the reason I brought up CPAC, is because you had a whole variety of characters appear at CPAC. Two of them were Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, or as we call him around here, Ron DeVirus, or Ron Death Sentence, and South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem. And both of them were there to do the thing that CPAC is nominally a function for. You see, CPAC has always been seen as not exact. I've talked about it before. CPAC is not so much a serious political conference where, serious people come together to have serious conversations about serious issues. It's primarily been two things. One, a chance for college Republicans to engage into some consequence-free fucking. That's number one. And number two, for prospective candidates for Congress or especially president to kind of formally introduce themselves to the Republican Party electorate as a whole. And Ron DeSantis was there, and he's talking about how great things are in Florida, but how they don't have any restrictions or anything. Kristi Noem's there saying that South Dakota was the only state that is it North Dakota or South Dakota? It's one of the Dakotas. it's whatever.
Where's the Sturgis bike rally held?
Yeah, whichever Dakota the Sturgis rally was in, it was that one. But she's saying that her state was the only one that never had a lockdown, that never forced a business to close or anything like that, and so on and so forth. And the end result was that they did the at the end of CPAC, they'll do a straw poll where they ask the attendees, who do you think should be our next nominee to run for president? Unsurprisingly, Trump won the straw poll by a significant margin, but right behind him were Ron DeSantis and Kristi Noem. Now, understand this. The CPAC straw poll is not exactly reliable. For the longest time, in fact, the annual winner of the CPAC strong poll for years and years was a certain politician that you guys may have heard of. His name is Ron Paul.
Oh,
and because as I mentioned,
I'm thinking of someone else. I don't know why.
Yeah, you're not Rand Paul. This is Rand Paul's dad, Ron Paul, the original mean politician.
Right. Okay.
After Ralph Nader, of course. But yeah, the reason Ron Paul always won was because, as I mentioned, CPAC is like, the fucking Coachella for college Republicans. So you have a lot of libertarian adjacent types down there. And because Ron Paul was able to get all of his supporters to CPAC, he would always win the straw poll. Now, of course, when it came to actually running for president, he fell woefully short. So obviously take the poll with this straw poll with a grain of salt. But conventional wisdom does hold that in the event Trump can't run in 2024, and I can tell you that there are people inside the GOP, up to and including some of Trump's most loyal ass-kissers, that do not want him to run in 2024 because they think it's just going to be a disaster. Because, I mean, you were the first guy since Herbert Hoover to lose the White House, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. And you don't even get the honor of having a dam named after you. You get a fucking golden statue that was ironically made in Mexico, and that's pretty much it. So you don't even get the wall for that matter. But anyway, so there are people, and we've talked about this on the program before, is that there are people, these nationalist, populist type people, that are hoping that someone can come along and take Trumpism and essentially power wash it and present and put a better face on it. Basically be Donald Trump without the idiocy, without the incessant tweeting or any of that stuff, and they'll pull it off.
So David Duke?
Well, not David Duke per se, but people like, for example, a Ted Cruz or a Jim Jordan or a Josh Hawley, who also, by the way, was in the CPAC poll, by the way. And you remember that Josh Hawley was willing to throw himself in with the insurrectionists on January 6th as all part of a plot to position himself as the nominee in 2024. In this straw poll, Josh Hawley came in at 0.0%. So what this means... Well, he was tied with... What this means is that precisely the same number of people want me or Josh Hawley to be the next Republican nominee, okay? Josh Hawley right now has precisely the same number of Republican supporters as I do. In fact, I might have a couple more than Josh Hawley, if I'm being honest. But I digress.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, not a good start there for Josh. But the point being is that people have kind of looked at people like Ron DeSantis or Kristi Noem as people who could be like the smart version of Donald Trump. Some are already saying that a DeSantis-Noem ticket might be the path to victory in 2024, which, all right, good luck with that. But the point being is that even if ultimately their chances of getting to the nominee are not great, and again, I've said that they're not, because I've said this a million times in this program, and to say it a million to one more, the nominee in 2024 is going to be a Trump. If not Don himself, on account of him being either in jail or fucking dead, it will probably be Ivanka or Don Jr., not Eric. Or maybe even Laura Trump, but not Eric. But DeSantis and Noem are going to try anyway to get the name in the hat. So Greg Abbott, he sees this. So now he's like, well, okay, wait a minute. I don't want Ron DeSantis stealing my thunder away from me. And more importantly, I've just let my entire state freeze to death after our glorious deregulated independent electrical grid fucking collapsed. So I need something to kind of take the heat off me, so to speak. So fuck it, let's open everything back up and get the economy going. Everyone's going to be happy, and no one's going to try to blame me for this winter storm debacle. Only now.
So let me get this straight.
Yeah.
He's opening it up because he saw it on TV and thought, this might work? Or is he trying to also go for a fucking 2024 presidential nomination?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, my God.
Absolutely.
He's trying to be Ron DeSantis, basically.
Yes, he is.
Kill
He's
your
trying...
fucking voters. That's going to fucking guarantee you a spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's like he's literally looking at what DeSantis and Noam are doing and saying, you know what, let's do that. I mean, it worked for these guys at CPAC, so let's see if I can do it and see if I can get my name in the hat right now. Understand that everything that every major Republican political figure does for the next few years, whether it's Ron DeSantis, Greg Abbott, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Jim Jordan, maybe not Jim Jordan, but all the other guys, it's based on the premise that they want to be the 2024 nominee, and so they're going to try to be as Trumpy as possible while also trying to convince the rest of America that, hey, don't worry, I'm not going to be crazy like that big orange fat ass, okay? You can trust me. It's going to be fine.
But unfortunately, there's still a cult following for Trump himself, so I doubt they're going to be able to be convincing to have the GOP, and especially the very faithful Trump believers, vote for anybody else other than Donald J. Trump.
Well, that can actually be used to our advantage.
How so?
If somehow, some way, you can get the Republican Party to rail hard against Trump and split and polarize the party, or if you can somehow find a way to keep Donald Trump from even getting past the primary, then that's already a lot of Republican votes lost.
Well, I'll tell you this. Trump, during his charming little speech, denied the rumors that he was going to start his own political party, which, we'll see. But
he should do it.
Yeah, right now, the inmates are running the asylum, okay? You have 17 total Republicans between the House and the Senate that voted to impeach and convict Donald Trump for inciting the insurrection. And everyone else is either... And we talked about this last time, is that the majority of people who didn't want to speak out about the insurrection, like the people that said, hey, what's wrong with humoring Trump about his little conspiracy theories? What harm could come from that? Well, it turns out the harm can come from that is 5 people dead. The reason they were doing...
you actually had to have been shot yourself to see that.
Yeah.
So
the reason that they were doing that is because they wanted to see if Trump could actually pull this off. Because, as I said, the GOP right now is more in common with Saddam Hussein's Ba'ath Party. And the rule of the Ba'ath Party was be the last one clapping when Saddam stops talking. So that's why, even though Trump is out of public office now for at least 4 years, hopefully forever, these people are still going to throw themselves at his feet to get his endorsements. Because remember, he still has the Republican mailing list. And these guys are a little bit tight on money now that corporate America is kind of abandoning them, because it turns out that supporting an insurrection against the government doesn't really do a lot of wonders for someone's corporate image. Who knew, right? But the idea that you can somehow, some way convince the GOP to dump Trump. They had that chance at the impeachment. They decided not to do it. So they're stuck with him, and they're dedicated to riding this out and dying by the death of 1,000 cuts. And even though midterm elections tend to usually swing for the opposition party, and the GOP is in a position where they could win back both the House and the Senate. That is very, very possible. It's not going to be a given, okay? The House map, we'll have to see how that goes. It depends on who they nominate, though I do predict, unfortunately, that we're going to see the candidates that the GOP nominates for the House are going to be less John James and more Marjorie Taylor Greene. And the Senate map for 2022 is not favorable to the Republicans. For example, one of the people up for re-election 2022 is Russia Ron Johnson himself, who, during the hearings about the COVID stimulus bill, made some kind of inane presentation about how high you can stack $1 billion or whatever it was. I'm not sure what the hell that was. I mean, this is a guy who's, I mean, look, this is a guy who decided to spend the 4th of July in Moscow. I don't ask if a person like that is okay, all right, because I assume that they're not. But anyway, so that also kind of leads to the other thing I wanted to talk about here is discussing, what we're really talking about are political realities, okay? The political reality of the situation right now is that Ron DeSantis and Kristi Noem are perceived as having a fast track to the 2024 nomination. So, and people like Greg Abbott, who may also want to be on that ballot, are going to try to get ahead of them. So they're going to do what Ron DeSantis and Kristi Noem did. They're going to open up their states. They're going to get rid of the mask mandates. And they're already coming up with this, and Abbott's already coming up with a scapegoat for when these cases inevitably spike, and when these deaths inevitably spike, already saying that Biden's releasing illegal immigrants infected with COVID into Texas communities. It's like...
It is blatantly clear we are so polarized right now that my theory of us having to look more for allies than trying to convince enemies is coming to fruition. And I think definitely somehow, some way, if you're a Democrat, you have to be trying to reach out to the people in Texas or the people in Mississippi that do not want the mask mandates removed, and you need to mobilize them.
Yes.
And if you don't do that, then I'm not even talking about the Democratic front at this point, but if we're ever going to end this childish nonsense where people fucking pontificate all day long and don't really produce any meaningful material that justifies it, if we're ever going to end this silly game, then the one thing we have to fundamentally recognize is that we cannot convince people over to our side if we do not have cohesion.
Mm-hmm.
And cohesion means we have to work well together. We have to manipulate the playing field to the best of our abilities. We have to call on all our allies, north and south, anybody we can fucking get. If we can get a branch of gay coal miners, we need them. Fucking... It does not matter anymore. Every nook, every cranny, every forest, every bush, anywhere you can find an ally, snatch them up.
Yes. And to that end, we also need to understand the political reality of our situations, okay? So let's go ahead and talk about something that's been going on with the COVID bill. So Joe Biden has been trying to pass a $1.9 trillion pandemic relief package. This is very comprehensive. It will accelerate testing and vaccination. It will fortify the Affordable Care Act. It will give bailout to struggling businesses. It will provide funding to cash-starved schools, states, and cities. It will put a pause on evictions. It will turn the child tax credit into direct monthly payments. It will boost unemployment benefits. And it will give $1,400 to most of us. In fact, the Center on Poverty and Social Policy estimates that if this bill is passed, it could cut child poverty in half this year. And its bill is supported by a majority of Americans, which is part of the reason, on both sides of the aisle, which is part of the reason why you haven't seen Fox News try to rip Biden over the bill. Instead, they've been focusing on Dr. Seuss and the Muppets and all that other stuff, So, but there's one particular group that is not happy with the passage of this bill. And that is, of course, our friends on the progressive side of things. So, one of the things that they were hoping to do was attach, because we've talked about this before, how bills, especially big ones like these, tend to have pork attached to them. Smaller things that probably wouldn't have a chance of passing on their own, but once attached to a larger bill, they may be able to have a better chance of passing, or kill the bill outright. Like we talked about, for example, that when they first tried passing a COVID stimulus last year, Rand Paul nearly derailed the whole thing by trying to sneak in an amendment that would have mandated a complete and total troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. So the pork that they tried to attach to this bill was a mandate to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. The Senate parliamentarian determined last week that this did not fit in the bill. And remember, this bill is not being passed in the normal fashion where it goes to the Senate and you get a 2/3 vote from the chamber, okay? Because the Republicans have said they are going to oppose this bill unanimously, okay? And that's that. So instead, they're going to pass it vis-a-vis budget reconciliation. This allows certain fiscal proposals to pass by a simple majority, thus avoiding the filibuster from the Republicans and the 60-vote supermajority that will be required otherwise.
So if you want that bill to pass, you've got to drop the $15 an hour minimum wage.
In a matter of speaking, okay, so let me just tell you how this works here. So the parliamentarian ruled that this didn't fit. It's like, look, okay, you're trying to pass a bill that helps everyone out because that's been affected by the pandemic. That's fine. Increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour does not fit in this. We are not including as part of the bill. Okay, fair enough. Now,
I mean, it's also fair for the fact that the only businesses that are working right now in a majority of states are the essential businesses, and
well, unless you're in states like Texas.
Yeah, if everything is going ethically with the essential businesses, you should be making money hand over fist because all those government contract companies are being given. Of course, that's if they decide to be fair.
Yeah. Now, let's go into why the progressives are particularly irate at the White House for doing this. Okay, so the Senate parliamentarian ruled that the $15 an hour minimum wage increase cannot be part of the bill. Vice President Kamala Harris, as her job as presiding officer of the Senate, does have the power to override that ruling. And in other words, the vice president could say, no, fuck you, we're putting this in the bill, and because I said so. And in that case, in order to override the override, you would need a 60 majority vote, and you're not going to find 10 Democrats that would vote Republicans. So if Kamala Harris wanted to, she could say, we're making this part of the bill, and it effectively would be part of the bill. Then the COVID bill gets passed, minimum wage increase $50 an hour, everything's peachy. Vice President Harris is not going to do this. The White House has said, listen, we are obviously disappointed by the parliamentarian's ruling, but we respect it, and we're not going to change this. So the progressives are pretty incensed. And
you mean they haven't been already because they haven't got that $2,000 check immediately?
Well, here's the thing, okay? So the reason why it's not part of this bill is because of two senators in particular. Joe Manchin from West Virginia and Kristen Sinema from Arizona. These senators do not support $15 an hour minimum wage. Now, the progressives are like, well, why can't Biden just call them up and say, hey, you need to support this? He certainly could. Two problems with that. First and foremost, the Senate is divided 50-50. You only have a 51-seat majority because the vice president happens to be a Democrat, okay? Otherwise, it's split down the middle. Republicans, again, are going to unanimously oppose this bill. What that means is that in order for this bill to pass, every single Democratic senator needs to vote yes on it, which means you really can't afford to put anything on there that would piss off even one of those senators.
Oh,
now, that being said, it's not like this wasn't already happening, but progressives have been dog over hand when it comes to wanting to say that the moderate liberal is the greatest gateway to fascism. This is probably going to cause them to double down on that rhetoric if they want.
Oh, they already are. They already are. I mean, you got Representative Ilhan Omar tweeting out that...
They have this opportunity and they're just fucking us, and these two senators, we need their names, we need their addresses. Like, they'll probably say shit like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said...
Bernie Sanders, ironically enough, is probably the only guy that's just like, whoa, calm down.
Well, if they want, maybe they should at least ask about Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who is pretty much one of the only Democrats I heard about that's against the $15 minimum wage. Am I right?
Okay, so, well, first of all, the reason that he's against... Well, Manchin actually gave an interview to the West Virginia newspaper about why he's against $50 hour minimum wage.
Okay.
The reason he's against it is because he's not against a wage increase in principle. I mean, given the fact that wages have stagnated over the course of the last few decades, I don't think anyone on the left really is at this point. What Manchin believes, though, is that $15 an hour is too high for rural areas like West Virginia, like areas outside of bustling metropolises where you have small businesses or mostly agricultural businesses that may not be able to properly support $15 an hour for their employees.
So you mean when Manchin made this argument, he was actually thinking about more people than just his constituents?
Well, he was thinking about his constituents because, again, he's in West Virginia. That's predominantly a rural state, rather.
He said something that's very compelling, though, is how he just specifically he didn't just establish it to his area, though. He established it to rural areas, which creates something that people could potentially identify with.
Then wouldn't the right action be to just implement something of, if this is too small of a business, like say a certain number of employees, or they have a certain amount of profits, then they don't have to deal with the $15 minimum wage mandate.
By the way, people always want to talk about how the fucking dumb communist liberals just want to destroy rural America. Fucking, am I dreaming, or was that a Democrat that just stood up for rural America?
It is very strange, and I thought he's just basically stabbing the backs of everybody. But with this, I guess I understand it, but he could have at least suggested it instead of just outright. He could have suggested a little mandate I just suggested instead of just outright going against it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's largely because right now the way the playing field is, you try to reconcile, right? Progressives should be like, yeah, fuck you, we're passing this anyway. They don't care about your opinion. They don't care about your position. As of right now, the Progressive Front hasn't gotten the picture.
Yeah.
They're just going to be like, oh, well, you're going to take this and you're going to like it. You're going to do what we say or else. Like,
yeah, I was gonna say earlier,
that's how they're viewing this right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say you got Representative Ilhan Omar tweeting things out like progressives are often told to fall in line. It's time to tell moderates to fall in line. And you got people like activist Yvette Simpson saying, okay, you know what? Okay, fine. Well, if Joe Manchin doesn't want to do this, we'll organize all the working class West Virginians who need this bill. And if Joe Manchin, he wants to be a Republican, let him be a Republican. We'll elect another Democrat to replace him. Here's the problem with that. Okay, two problems with this. First and foremost,
Joe Manchin is probably not going to get primaried out because he stood up for his constituency.
Well, let me explain that, Sharp. Okay, I'll get to that in a bit. But first and foremost, again, it's 50-50 in the Senate right now. If any one Democrat flips, whether it's Joe Manchin, whether it's Kristen Sinema, whether it's Elizabeth Warren, whether it's Bernie Sanders, if any one Democrat flips, Mitch McConnell's the majority leader again. And nothing's getting done if that happens, okay? We all know that. I know that, you know that, Joe Biden knows that, Joe Manchin knows that.
I don't know why, but the big three aren't really as menacing as people try to make them out to be. Fucking, they're kind of dumb.
The big three?
Four.
Yeah, the big three, you know, fucking Elon, Ocasio...
yes, AOC and her band of sisters, and now brother as well. Yeah, I mean, well, again, there's still only a handful of representatives in Congress, but that's another story. But anyway, the point is that if any one Democrat flips, you lose your majority in the Senate. Mitch McConnell's back in power again. That's number one. Number two, more importantly, let's talk about Joe Manchin's constituency. On this program, we refer to certain states that have gone Republican in the past and are probably going Republican in the future. States like, say, Alabama or Kentucky. We call them the reddest of the red. West Virginia is the reddest of the reddest of the red. West Virginia is a state that Donald Trump won by 39 points. Joe Manchin won his own election by 3 points, and he is the only Democrat elected statewide. Okay, think about that for a second. In the entire state of West Virginia, and all of the elected officials there, from the governor all the way down to the town dog catcher, Joe Manchin's the only Democrat. So, if you try to primary Joe Manchin, and especially with a progressive, you've lost that seat. I mean, a Democrat is not winning that seat. A progressive Democrat is not winning in West Virginia. Hell, if Joe Manchin switches sides to a Republican, which Mitch McConnell will do everything in his power to ensure that he does, if that happens, then he's going to be able to keep his seat until he's dead. In fact, West Virginians might vote for him after he's dead.
Like, I don't think people understand the game Mitch McConnell plays, though. When he doesn't have the upper hand, what he essentially does is talk. And it's the scariest thing this man can do, because he's not just talking. He's creeping over people's shoulders and whispering in their ear and creating doubt and sowing discord gradually because he likes it that way.
As I've said on this program, Mitch McConnell doesn't do anything without planning it out way, way in advance. And you know that if he can get Joe Manchin to flip, he absolutely will.
So if you fuck Joe gonna fuck you.
Yeah. Okay.
Is anybody going to let Elon Omar know that if they lose Joe Manchin, that's going to be the end of any sort of thing that's going to be any sort of control the Dems have?
I don't think they care, because every single time people have tried to approach Ocasio or Elon or any of these people with these arguments, they'll fall in line when Pelosi gets on their ass. But when you try to confront them on social media, this will result in one of two things. They'll either say you're full of shit and an idiot, or they'll block you. The great progressive left listen to nobody but ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the problems with the progressives is that they tend to overstate their appeal to the broader electorate. Like, if they honestly think that if Joe Manchin flips to the Republican Party, they can elect a Democrat in his place in West Virginia. I mean, that's just that's asinine. It's delusional thinking.
You know, it's ironic. You'd have had a better chance if Cenk Uygur was still in charge of Justice Democrats, but SpaghettiOs, you're seeing how they fucked up early on when establishing Justice Democrats. Cancel culture fucks them in the ass again.
Yeah, I did actually. By the way, there is new data showing that slogans like "defund the police" are turning off minority voters. So, yeah, good job about that. But the point being is that, this is one of the problems that progressives have, is that they overstate their appeal with the electorate. They're under this assumption that
they huff their own thoughts.
They're under this assumption that America is much more woke than it really is, because that's what they're exposed to on Twitter. If the AOCs and Rashida Tlaibs and Ilhan Omars of the world want to actually start throwing their weight around, if they want to actually get themselves to a place where they can tell the neoliberals, you need to get in line now. You know what you need to do? You need to start carrying Republican-drawn districts dominated by modern suburbanites. So you need to take a Rashida Tlaib or an AOC, put them in R+1 district, and have them win. Barring that, the most you can hope for is winning in blue states and blue districts.
You need Cenk Uygur back, because that man was actually a political tactician. Kyle Kulinski left too. But here's the thing, right? If Kulinski had stayed behind, Kulinski doesn't know what he's doing when it comes to drawing district lines. But fucking Uygur might have actually been able to pull it off. If they hadn't made him stand down, or quote-unquote fired him, Justice Democrats would probably be in a much better position, because the man knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing. He was a competent leader.
I've often said that the smartest thing that Nancy Pelosi did in 2018 is that for the 22 midterms, she said, listen, forget the purity tests, forget whether or not this person is properly woke or whatever. Go out there, find me candidates that can win. And they did win. And they were able to get by in 2020 because they won those moderate districts, those moderate voters again. And they did that with moderate Democrats, not with the hardcore progressive ones, okay? because again, America's not as woke as you want it to be.
Yeah, actually, you have a better chance with moderate Democrats that have semi-progressive beliefs, because here's the thing, right? It's not that progressivism cannot win in these districts. It's that this shit has to be more like a slow boil,
Yes.
not immediately turning the fucking heat up. Because the second you fucking do that, it's like, fuck it, we're going south for the winter, boys.
Yep. And I'm going to
Getting
tell you this
cold
as well.
over here. But
And I'm going to tell you this as well. With the GOP basically on the fast track to becoming a minority party, the stage is set for Democrats to be in charge potentially for an entire generation. And you need this administration, you need Joe Biden to succeed if you want to have hope of someday having a President Ocasio-Cortez or a President Tlaib or something like that. And if he can't get this COVID bill passed, then we're already behind the 8 ball, not even a month into the administration. You're a month into the administration and you can't get a huge piece of legislation passed. You're already behind the 8 ball. And I told you guys when Biden was elected that the Democrats can't afford to be disputing about this, okay? Everyone's got to be behind Joe or they're going to get eaten alive by the GOP. They just are. I mean, that's you don't have to like it, but that's the way it is. That's the way it's going to be.
yeah.
You know, it's like the guy on The Wire said, you want things to be one way, but it's not. It's the other way.
You know, fucking, yeah. Like, you have the Senate majority off of a few ticks. And in fact, this position is actually the most advantageous for anybody who's moderate, because there will constantly be that looming pressure for Dems to stay reasonable, because they can't get people like, you know, Manchin or things like that to vote any way they want them to.
No, they can't.
And yeah, and I don't progressives view that as a bad thing. I view that as a good thing, because I feel like some of the things that progressives want to do would not work here in rural America, would completely fuck our way of life and our communities. And they'd be sitting here huffing their own farts, mocking us while we suffer, and they're supposed to be the party that cares.
Supposedly, indeed.
Like,
But yeah.
that's essentially how I view the Progressive Front. And if that's how I view the Progressive Front, you guys really need to change your game.
So yeah, what we're seeing here really from Biden, even though they could use their powers to get the $15 an hour minimum wage attached to the bill, but they won't. What we're seeing here is what we call governing, all right? It's what mature people do when they're trying to pass legislation for this country.
I think the past 4 years have kind of warped what government has actually
Yeah,
done.
I know that people may have forgotten what that's like after the last administration, but this is like how actual governance works, in case everyone forgot.
Having to compromise with your colleagues and
Instead of just saying, fuck that, we're just going to go with what these people are suggesting. And, we're only going to govern and help the people who pretty much kissed our ass in our ring enough.
Yeah, which is kind of that was the Trump approach for the most part. That's kind of the approach he's taking again, which is why he's planning to go after these all the reps and the senators who voted to convict him after the insurrection. I don't know what the hell he's going to do, but, whatever. But the way that Trump did things was that, you do something for me, and then one day, and that day may never come, I'll expect you to do me a favor. That's not how you do things. Governing is you get together with someone and you discuss your issues and you compromise. Like, for example, when we do eventually get to a wage increase, it's probably not going to be $50 an hour. It's probably going to be $30 an hour. And it's like, well, we wanted 15. And it's like, yeah, I know you wanted 15. That kind of sucks. But it's like the same with...
Bro, if we could get 13, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing, with the stimulus checks. $1,400 instead of $2,000. It's like, well, we wanted 2,000. Like, yeah, I know you wanted 2,000.
Well,
and yeah, it sucks you're not getting it.
Actually, by a loophole, you technically did get the 2,000 if you got the 600.
Yeah, that's the other thing too.
He kept it for
yeah, I mean the 600. The 600 at first, and then the 1,400 the next. I mean, that's not quite Bush 41 disguising new taxes as revenue enhancers, but it's in the same spirit, so I can kind of appreciate it in that regard.
Now, that being said, the stimulus probably isn't doing huge favors for people that are in a really bad position right now. The primary thing the stimulus has kind of provided, for example, people like me, is a little extra money. Like, if I'm being real, I know that on the surface we establish optics like we're fighting for financial aid. 600 wasn't significant. 1,200 wasn't significant. 1,400 won't be significant. The amount of money you would need to make it by long enough is not money government is willing to give. That's the truth. So when we boil down to it, what we're actually advocating for is having a little extra money in our pockets. That's it. And that's how we're trying to exploit this situation, and that's the truth. And you know what? I don't blame you for exploiting the situation. Exploit the hell out of this. What does it Democrats say? Never waste a good crisis? Well, you know what? The populace needs to learn to say that too. Never waste a good political fucking in the ass for both parties. Like, because if Republicans make one wrong move, they could potentially lose a seat. If Democrats make one wrong move, they don't get a vote passed on a bill they want, and they possibly flip one of their own if it's too severe. This is like the fuck you position. This is the position you want both parties to be in. If you've ever been a moderate or a holier than thou.
I guess somebody came into Sharp's room real quick. Give him a moment.
Sorry, Dad's setting up that new laptop for when we go to Florida.
That's okay.
People kind of they don't knock. They just kind of walk in. There's no lock on the door.
Why do you think I live alone? Well, I was forced to. Okay, but I was kind of forced to, honestly, so.
Okay, that's fair. But yeah, if you've ever been some thinks they're better than everybody else style centrist, like, oh yeah, both parties suck, they'll never be that good. This is kind of the position you want both parties in. I literally cannot overstate. This is the fuck you position. This really is. Like, when it comes to getting what you want, with the right kind of threat, you can probably have it. Not a death threat, mind you, but a threat against what they actually care about. Power. Just imagine it. Imagine for even 1 second, somebody like, let's say Soups, for example, had it up the balls eventually to say, I smell Democrat in one of his districts. To get something he wanted. Or he says to a potential Democratic representative at some point that tries to ban AR-15s in his state. And he goes, you smell that? That smells like a Republican. Like, and that is something Soups would do. That exact tone, those exact words. Like, I understand my friend so well. But to me, that's advantageous. And that makes me about as excited as fucking Solidus Snake from Metal Gear Solid 2 having swords called Democrat and Republican. And people still want to insist that video games aren't political.
Trust me.
Made me giddy as a fucking child to find that out. And this is like a man literally trying to topple the world order.
Anyway.
Yeah, like, fuck you position. Best position in the world if you're a moderate kind of guy. Actually, this is what sucks about being too politically engaged. You can't let the good times roll.
Because you're literally on a tightrope. You're literally on a tightrope. If you slip, you're fucked.
You just can't. You're literally on the camp of idolatry, or you're on the camp of Karen. Like, if you're a political extremist, there's what you got. There's what you got to leverage. Fucking shit. Dick ass. And you're in the fuck you position, so you bend to my will. And you must fucking hate the fact that if you want anything you want done, or even a fraction of it, you have to turn to people like me or Helios for advice.
Or, well, yeah, your majority leader and their leaders.
And if you don't, you get what you deserve. To lose everything you worked for because you refuse to evolve.
And you may lose to a crazier person who probably is singing better the many things that you would like to hear, but will probably still deliver you nothing, but you probably wouldn't even care.
There are two definitive facts in this country, right? Definitive fact number one, you will never ban guns in Texas. Definitive fact number two, you will never unban guns in California.
There's just no way. You might as well just stick to the the actual places where it matters. The rest of us.
Yeah. But why does that statement matter, right? What I just said there. It matters because it ties in perfectly with this shit Democrats have to worry about with Joe Manchin and him possibly flipping, or them possibly not getting his vote and not being able to pass the bill they're trying to pass. It all comes full circle. When there is a state that says, I won't do X, and you need that state's vote, bullying them is probably just going to engage retaliation, not getting what you want. Like, I have found it honestly neurodivergent to some degree that people think you can get what you want just by pressuring and bullying people all the goddamn time. And then you come across someone like me, and I deliberately do things back to spite you, and you don't know how to respond because you've never had to deal with someone like me. Ever. You're so used to just getting your way and getting everyone to bend the knee because they're so peaceful. But the second this guy cocks a 9mm, you're running for the hills. So if I say, I'm going to fight or I'm going to punch you, the conversation ends there because you've never dealt with adversity. You've never dealt with the level of coordinated tactical opposition. Who knows how to rip your foundation out from under its seams because they've seen what you're made of. And it's styrofoam. I can punch through the shit. You don't have a sturdy foundation. You don't even have insulation. You want to like fucking talk about a $15 an hour minimum wage. You don't even have the sway or the power you think you do to do that. And it's just been so hilarious seeing people there boasting about power you know they don't have. So what are they doing? Just hoping you don't call their bluff? Because half the time these dumb fuckers are bluffing. They don't have the ground to risk. They don't have the bridges to burn. They've got nothing. You open up their toolbox, they don't have an arsenal. They don't even have a plan or a strategy. Just, the people will side with us. Like, you're sure of that, right? Like, you're 100%. You know what issues are popular in West Virginia, right? Because I will let you know, there are lefty positions that are fairly popular in West Virginia right now. Like, there's been this strong influx of an anti-Confederate populace recently, in West Virginia in particular. And, if people could just pull the strings on that, you might just unravel the Confederate flag. But, hey, who am I to give people advice? Apparently I don't know anything. I've, been doing this podcast for a long time. Like, I was doing it before Helios and I met. And it was a different rendition, and we talked about different things. But I was always privy to the fact that if I don't win this one, I'll learn from my mistakes. But the primary thing I have seen with the progressive sphere of the world that has not ceased in the last, let's say, 6 years, I've seen it transpire. It was before Trump, and it'll be after Trump, and it'll be after Biden. But literally this shit is just Icarus flying too close to the sun. Like, the hubris, the blatant hubris, the blatant egotism, the sneering, thinking you've got it figured out. And I'm just sitting here holding a chuckle because I know you're gonna fall, and you're gonna fall hard. And then, people want to say people like me are a fascist fellow traveler, while I have people in my own group call me a fucking communist. Like, what is this fucking shit, honestly? This fucking cockamamie, trite ass suckery. I do this thing for fun, and I think the primary thing I enjoy is pissing the right people off. Like, when people get pissed that I am talking positively about vaccines, when people get pissed that I talk about charity, that I advocate charity, and that I recommend people charities, I'm feeling like I'm going in the right direction. When people get pissed that I talk about actual funny leftist comedy that offends them because they're too progressive, I'm just like, I like that you'll never get a Dave Chappelle comedy skit. I like that. Because you are going to look like the fucking doofus in the end, not me. You're going to be the one with egg in your face when you've essentially made enemies out of all your friends, and it's going to be amazing to watch that happen.
I've always said, when you can't tell your friends from your enemies, it helps nobody. And this is something I saw earlier today when I was perusing the headlines, just kind of looking for things to talk about in the program here. When you look on the right, whether it's people like Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity or Laura Ingraham or whatever, they claim that when it comes to the various attacks you get from the left, whether it's cancel culture or deplatforming or whatever, they make it sound like that it's strictly a problem that the right is dealing with, that it's strictly a thing the right has to deal with. It's not. In fact, it's much more likely to happen if you're a moderate Democrat. Like, remember how I said, remember how I told you guys that there's nothing that the true believers hate more than a Republican who won't support the president? Well, something similar is going on here. Because the difference is that between, of course, them and the true believers is that when it comes to the far right contingent of the GOP, it's about advancing towards a political ideology as crafted by an individual person, in this case Donald Trump. Whereas with the progressives, it's about who can be the most woke, who can be the most inclusive.
Like, don't get me wrong, right? They hate you if you're polar opposite of them, but they hate you more if you're a potential sprouting alternative to them. Yes. They hate that. They loathe that. They despise that because they know. Thanks for fucking talking right into my mic.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I heard that. You gotta go ahead and clean it up there, Gonzo. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but like, fucking, what was I saying?
Gonzo, help us out here.
I am unfortunately tending to something in my server, so I forgot.
Okay, yeah. So, okay, yeah, you were going on about.
I remember.
Okay, yours. Yeah, okay.
If you see that thread loose on the progressive shirt, and everybody sees that loose thread, it's just dangling there.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows what happens when you pinch that thread and hold on while they're running away.
Oh, yeah, we've all seen the cartoons and stuff like that.
Very quickly, you see the Emperor's got no clothes.
Mm-hmm.
And people hate people like me on the progressive side of things because I am likable. People are like, no, you know what? Instead of going like full SJW because I'm done with this Trump shit, I'm going to see what fucking this guy's talking about or what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
They'll always come to me before they ever go to people like Hassan Piker, before they ever go to people like fucking Ocasio-Cortez or Anita Sarkeesian or whoever, right?
Yeah.
And through doing so, there are other lefties in that progressive sphere. They're going to be like, you know what? It would be beneficial to make an ally out of this guy. And I don't really agree with half the things these people I'm with say. And then all of a sudden, it begins this sort of domino effect.
Mm-hmm.
People see that a person like me, more moderate, can triumph in the conversation, can gain headway, can convince certain people, and can give compelling arguments without resorting to fucking fascism and all this different crap, which is the lie they tell, and they depend on that lie to hold because generally their walk of life is miserable. Like when it actually comes to being politically minded, if you're a progressive and you're surrounded by other progressives, you're essentially being fed this worldview that if you want anything less than Medicare for all, you're part of the problem.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's definitely like a very restrictive mindset, and again, it's something that you see from the right, and it's like it demonstrates that again through what's going on with Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin. You have people like, well, they don't want to support our cause. Fine, let's get rid of them. Kind of in the same way as how you have a sizable contingent now of the Republican House caucus that are like, we need to get rid of anybody and everybody who didn't support Donald Trump.
Then you got people like my ass just walking up all fucking cavalier, light a cigarette and go, how about we let go of you?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not always that simple because you get some people that are in states or districts where they could run their race out of a hot tub and still probably win. I mean, like half the reason that Marjorie Taylor Greene won her seat in the first place is because she won in a very red district. Once she got the primary done, I mean, that was it. The rest was just a formality,
But there's more than one way to skin a cat, Helios. After all, they skinned the fuck out of Marjorie Taylor Greene, did they not?
Well, in a matter of speaking, her behavior, by the way, has gone. Some of them actually get even more unhinged. Like, I guess, like, you know, based on the clips that I've seen, like, the first thing she does whenever the House calls a meeting, like, the first thing that ever happens now is that she immediately raises an objection and demands to take the rest of the day off. And it's like, wait a minute, when you get kicked off of all your committee assignments, didn't you say that now you had time to quote unquote do real work for the government now?
Well, she's still super pissed off that they have to have a metal detector in the chambers now, and that she has to give up her fucking gun. Because God knows that she's going to take that gun and shoot Pelosi, or at least try to, all the way from down in the galley.
You know, it's ironic. I'm actually not against them having guns in the chamber. I'm specifically against Marjorie Taylor Greene having guns in the chamber.
Yeah, exactly. It's
have fucking Nadler just show up with a minigun. I'm fine with that.
Oh my God, that's something, all right.
Doesn't help that Laura Boebert is also fucking probably.
Oh yeah, Laura Boebert going on fucking like Newsmax or ON or one of the far right news sites and saying that the proposed one of the proposed equality bills, I don't know if it's for the pandemic relief or not, but
I do understand why we say no guns in the chamber. We really just don't want this to become fucking Saddam Hussein. I will kill all those who disagree with me. Now agree with me.
Yeah, because at that point, that's not unity or negotiations. That's a fucking hostage situation.
That's straight up a hostage situation. It's like, that's not a choice. That's an ultimatum.
Congratulations. Now you know what the GOP is going to be like for the foreseeable future now. It's going to be a hostage situation, basically, for any candidate that wants to run there. They're ultimately going to have to find a way to deal with Trump. And
I guess primaried by a Trump.
I mean, here's the big irony. You're never, ever, ever going to do that by depending on that particular constituency. And honestly, I think if people wanted to just disentangle people from the whole Trump thing, they should have done it way back. For some people, it's far too late for that. They're going to ride this car straight off a cliff. And they'll be perfectly fine with that. Like, it's kind of how these things work, right? They establish a death cult, and then everybody drinks the Kool-Aid, and then no more death cult. That's kind of how it works, right?
Yeah, like I've said, like half the reason I'm hesitant to pencil in Trump as a 2024 nominee is because I'm not entirely unconvinced that he and his followers aren't going to do like a fucking Jonestown massacre right outside of Mar-a-Lago. Okay? Like, I'm not convinced that's not going to happen.
Trump just establishes his own fucking private army. It's mostly just like fucking miniguns duct taped to golf carts.
And then they all drink the Kool-Aid and die.
And then they all drink the Kool-Aid and die.
Yikes, I don't know.
It'll be like a rich man's Waco. That's what it'll be.
A rich man's Waco. That's something to write.
Yeah, something to write home about.
Something to write home about. My point is, right, I think if anybody wants to get to that disenfranchising people from the Trump philosophy, you have to start by making fun of this shit. Stop taking it so seriously. I have to convince you at this point, right? We are at such a negative crossroads. It wouldn't be completely unreasonable to believe God is dead. And if God is dead, then there are no ramifications for the dark jokes brewing in your head. And I would genuinely think, right, since we're in the midst of a pandemic, and a lot of people have kind of gotten sick of and are starting to be disenfranchised from the progressive talking points, and those talking points are visibly seen losing poll numbers.
Yeah. So
I think it's safe to watch Dave Chappelle again. I think you're good.
yeah, I think you're okay watching Dave Chappelle again, and I think like ultimately, and one of the you've noticed that the Republicans are doubling down on cancel culture. Okay, this is not necessarily because they're now suddenly champions of free speech. Even though the Democrats have more or less given that up to them, which for better or worse. It's because this is really the only thing they have left right now, okay? Because they can no longer claim to be the party of fiscal conservatism or responsibility. I mean, they can try to right now. They can be like, well, like $2 trillion, that's a lot of money we're spending on this. Never mind that you spent the last 4 years blowing through the federal budget like a drunken socialist sailor, okay? So, yeah, good luck. What's up?
What did blowing through all that money got us, though?
Yeah. Nothing. It got us a tax bill and a fucking wall. That's about it.
Yeah.
And the wall's not even finished. But
it's not even effective, really. People can climb it.
Yeah. So if you can't really win elections based on the economy now, the only thing you have left is a social aspect. And in this respect, the Republicans have been steadily getting their ass beat on a variety of social issues, okay? Abortion, they fought to a draw, which means that, we're not going to overturn Roe v. Wade. We're going to give women the right to choose, but we're going to have all these various moral questions and concerns and instances of hand-wringing surrounding the process, okay? So you can have an abortion, but we're going to second-guess the hell out of you every way you go. But they fought that to a draw. They lost the battle on gay rights. They lost the battle on prohibition, really, when you think about it. And so now
not only that, if they would try to, I imagine, and WAPO even had an opinion article about it, if Biden's Democratic Party managed to pass an infrastructure bill, that's also another defeat for the Republicans.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'll admit, a culture war fought with economic policy was always a losing fight.
Yeah, but so now when they double down on cancel culture, it's because this is the only issue they have left. And most Americans, for better or worse, don't really give a shit about it. Like if you talk to a guy who didn't spend at least like 8 hours a day on Twitter or on Facebook or whatever. By the way, Facebook has announced that its ban on political ads is going to be lifted on March 4th, which is tomorrow, based on the day that we recorded this thing. So that's be something to see there. I think the Lincoln Project is already planning some ads on Facebook, but that's another story. The point being is that... Oh, fuck me. Now I lost my train of thought. What the hell was I? Fuck. All right, we'll just start another one then. So... I mentioned before how you have people like Ilhan Omar saying the moderates need to fall in line. Well, guess what? You're not in a position where you can make them fall in line. America doesn't really is not interested in making you fall in line. In a related story, America, in addition to not being as woke as the progressives will want it to be, they're kind of meh on cancel culture as well. Because, again, unless that you have a huge presence online, you're probably not going to be aware of it. And I think if you...
Something I like is because of the pandemic, we're now seeing that. Because like the parity between internet and real life has shrunken even more, because while people were locked inside of their homes, they had a lot of spare time to kill.
Yeah.
And in that time, they have seen what a festering fucking shithole the internet is, and how detached from reality it is. And now, the hens have come home to roost. And normies are essentially the divine judgment of the internet. Are any of you free of sin?
There is let's just say there's a very, very good reason why there is now bipartisan support to have some kind of regulation for the internet, whether that's some kind of set of rules, whether that's repealing Section 230 or whatever. Both parties now have a vested interest in regulating the internet, and it's precisely because...
If you wanted to be harsher on defamation of character on the internet, I would be for that.
Mm-hmm.
Because then people would like think twice about spreading all these lies about how you're a fucking pedophile and all this different shit.
We'll cut down on the necessary
definitely
stuff
think
with the
twice on
sex
it.
offender registry because
Yeah.
if you're on it, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Even if they
Like-
prove, even if they found out you're innocent and that the girl who accused you is lying, you're still fucked.
I definitely think that one thing this pandemic has done has been an eye-opener to how rotten and decayed the discourse is online.
Mm-hmm.
And now, right, boomers and normies aren't looking away from this and going, that's not important. No, now they're looking at it and going, honestly, this is all that matters.
Yeah, and especially when the aforementioned discourse, through propagating the big lie about the 2020 election, resulted in people getting hurt and killed because some people believe that. And there are still people trying to push this narrative. I mean, Mike Pence, for example, we talked about this beforehand in the show, is that you're seeing a lot of state Republican legislatures or state legislatures controlled by the Republican Party pass these bills that are explicitly designed to make voting tougher for women and minorities. So you got Mike Pence out there defending this legislation, okay? This is a guy who was pretty much unpersoned by the Don after January 6th, who didn't go to CPAC because he's afraid he's going to get murdered if he does, and he still wants to propagate the big lie, and he wants to do it for no other reason than that, maybe if we do it like this, maybe Democrats won't get so lucky and we'll have a chance to win back the White House this time. And it's like, good luck with that. But the moment you're willing to trade in people's lies for sake of political points, as Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott are doing, then you just rolled an 18 in their favor. I mean, it's really the best I can put it there.
I also think cancel culture taught us the hard way that when you try to suppress an idea, it looks sexier and sexier and sexier.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, just because no one's allowed to discuss an idea doesn't mean it's going to magically disappear overnight. It's going to go underground.
They'll do it in private and then lie to your face about it. In
Yeah.
fact, what did I say? I said there would be people amongst your own circle of friends that are beginning to have doubts because they talk to people on the outside because they weren't as extreme as you. And when they do that, they come back to that group
Yes.
just no longer disillusioned to it. Seeing it for what it is, seeing how people treat each other, and seeing how sensitively people react to every little thing, they begin to start to realize something's wrong here.
Yeah. I mean, on the last episode of Lincoln Project podcast, Rick put it thusly, is that we want to try to find a proper balance in this nation. We obviously don't want it to become a statist authoritarian hellhole as Trump and the True Believers would have us do. But you also don't want it to become some kind of woke utopia either.
Shit. Hold on.
Uh-oh, what was that?
Asshole in the
got-
parking lot.
Uh-oh. Oh, boy. Well, Gonzo goes and deals with that.
Yeah, he's just trying to drive his car into... What is that fucking guy doing?
I don't know. I can't see him, so I can't tell you. I'm just here. I'm just the guy hearing the horn through his headphones. So yeah.
There's an asshole that keeps doing this every time, every night.
What is he doing?
Just loudly honks until somebody comes around. I don't know why.
Well, you're.
It's even worse. I have a window open trying to bring in cool air, and it makes it even louder.
Hell yeah.
Anyway.
So, all right. So we're coming to the end of the show here now, and so one of the things that I wanted to touch on this really briefly, actually, because it's something I've been watching. So, as you guys know, I've been trying to look for ways to properly use entertainment to kind of educate people about political realities, and I started watching this show that some of you may have heard of. It's called For All Mankind, and it airs on Apple TV.
Oh my god, I love it.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's a great show. Obviously, it's about the space race, so I'm already there. That's number one. Number two, more importantly, it's presented as kind of like this alternate history where the Russians make it to the moon first, and it's like, okay, if the Russians land on the moon first, what would happen then? It's a very, very convincing alternate history, by the way, one that shows that these we
had a hell of a lot more to prove, so we reached for the stars instead of just the moon.
Well, it was more that the whole reason we went to the moon was to beat the Russians to it, and in this alternate universe, it's like, okay, the Russians put the first guy on the moon. Fuck it, we're gonna have the first base on the moon. And it's gonna be a military base because why not? Yeah. So, but what the show really does a great job of is that it's not just about what could have been from a spaceflight perspective. It does a great job of capturing the political mindset of the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And it talks about things like the influence that people like Ted Kennedy had, before Chappaquiddick, which actually never happened in this continuity, which meant that he was ultimately able to challenge Richard Nixon in an election and win, by the way. So it does a really great job of capturing the political mindset of the 70s, and it talks about these things that have to be done in order to pass things that you would think any reasonable American would want to pass. Like, for example, in the show, the Equal Rights Amendment is passed. And the Equal Rights Amendment was something that was floated about during the 70s, ultimately defeated because it couldn't get enough support. But they do pass it in the show. However, and without getting into spoilers, the passing of the ERA comes at a great cost. And there's a moment where a character is talking with Werner von Braun, and von Braun says, have you ever wondered why the facilities that build our rockets are spread across the country and they're located in certain political districts? Which is very, very true, is that I mentioned on the show before, is that a lot of NASA's facilities are not centralized to like one state or other. They tend to be spread out, and more often than not tend to be located in the districts of certain Congress people that are friendly to the space program or have been friendly to the space program because they provide jobs. So it's a really good show. I recommend taking a look at it.
Yeah, I remember this, and he essentially brings up to her that his report will never reach the public. It'll be classified and locked in like a cabinet somewhere, and that the primary thing she has to do is take advantage of the corrupt system's desire to suppress his report.
Yeah, on the one hand, of course, it's a very, very cynical take. It's like, instead of Von Braun doesn't tell this character, and again, for a bit more context without spoiling anything, there is an episode where a Saturn V blows up. And von Braun does his own little report on the subject, and he discovers that it blew up because of a component that was manufactured by a certain company, and the only reason this company was given the contract to manufacture this component was so that that state would support the Equal Rights Amendment. So in other words, the cost of passing the Equal Rights Amendment was that a rocket blew up. And what von Braun doesn't tell the characters, tell him, listen, you got to get the story out, you got to bring the truth, you got to show everybody what happened. What he does instead is, listen, you got to take advantage of the situation here to get yourself something better for yourself. And that often that's a very, very true reality of our political system, is that half the reason when it comes to corruption or anything like that in our system that never really gets flushed out. Part of that is because instead of people realize that it's a hell of a lot more advantageous to just game the system for their own benefit rather than come clean and tell everybody what's going on. Like, you want to know why gerrymandering is always going to exist, is because even Democrats know that, sure, they could pass legislation that would outlaw gerrymandering forever and everything would get a whole lot more fair, but if they redraw the district lines so that they benefit them, that works out for them a hell of a lot better than just getting rid of them altogether.
Yeah.
and it sucks. But that's the way.
It's why in movies or in fantasy settings, when a new weapon or device is discovered, I'm going to use a reference from Call of Duty Black Ops, for example. Viktor Reznov decides to sink a submarine that has the prototype for the Nova 6 gas inside of it. And he says, and I quote, "I'll arm the explosives. We'll plunge this vessel into the deep. We can't allow either side to get a hold of this terrible weapon." It's because of this fucking knowledge. You have to be the guy to fucking destroy it. If you genuinely think this is a moral evil, you act. You don't wait for fucking permission to do it. If you think what's right is what's right, you don't wait for the systems to come along and tell you what to do. You don't wait for fucking guidelines on what to do next. You just go with your fucking gut feeling. And Reznov's gut feeling was sink that fucking ship.
Sink the ship.
If the Russians get a hold of it, they'll use it to further communism. If the Nazis get a hold of it, they'll use it to further fascism.
Well, it was the Nazis were already out of the picture. It was the Russians and the Americans at that point. It's basically Rezov's whole thing was that they're not going to destroy this. They're just going to use this gas on each other. So no one can have this thing. Yeah.
And Viktor Reznov was like one of the more interesting characters in Call of Duty, even though he was only prevalent in like 2 games. Yeah.
I also will say, going back to For All Mankind, is that when we talk about Wernher von Braun, this is perhaps the best depiction of von Braun that I've ever seen in media, because it's the one depiction that deals with all the complexities of Wernher von Braun. Because whenever space Twitter remembers von Braun, it's always a very awkward conversation. Because von Braun, I mean, he's the guy that designed the Saturn V. He's the guy that really made interplanetary travel a reality. He did a lot of great things. He was also a member of the SS. He was a card-carrying Nazi, literally. He developed the world's first ballistic missile. And those missiles were built by people in the concentration camps, people that died to build his missiles. Now, von Braun himself claims that he didn't really have a choice. He was kind of forced into being a Nazi, and that he had no idea that, people were literally dying to build him his missile. And he didn't even want it to be a missile in the first place. He wanted it to be a spacecraft, but Hitler told him, no, you're making it a missile instead. But you have other people that say, like, no, von Braun knew what he was doing. He was complicit in all this. And so that's what it comes down to, is that this is where cancel culture kind of becomes more nuanced than you think. Because on the one hand, it's very easy to cancel someone like von Braun. I mean, because, the guy was a fucking Nazi. He was arguably guilty of war crimes. But when you weigh that against what he did afterwards, because von Braun, he could have very easily fled to Argentina with the rest of the Nazis. Instead, he decided he was going to come to America, and he was going to use his expertise initially to create weapons of war. Yes, the Jupiter missile, the Redstone missile. But eventually, he finally got to do what he really wanted to do, was that he and a bunch of his scientist buddies from his days with the Nazis got together, and they built a rocket that sent us to the freaking moon. And several of these scientists, I can actually tell you, did eventually get deported after the program was over because of their ties with the Nazis.
The full truth of Operation Paperclip was we knowingly recruited people who were ex-Nazis to NASA in order to get us to the moon. Mm-hmm. But there was a fail-safe protocol to prevent the president from being incriminated for such a scandal, which was, as soon as they'd done what they were going to do,
we cut them loose.
We shaft them.
Yeah. It's a very sad state of affairs there. So it's why, like I said, whenever space Twitter brings up Wernher von Braun, it's always an awkward conversation, because it's like, yeah, the guy brought us to the moon, but the guy was also a Nazi, and we're supposed to cancel all the Nazis. So what do we do about this guy?
Cancel the moon? I don't fucking know.
I don't know. I can tell you that at least one of the great things about I don't get a chance to talk space policy all that much, which is something I always have my ear to the ground on. The Biden administration is managing. They want to put forth a more realistic deadline for the Artemis program to get us back to the moon, because Trump wanted us back on the moon by 2024. I can tell you right now that was never going to work out. That was just not going to happen. Thankfully, the Biden administration does realize this now, and looks like they're going to set a more realistic deadline, like 2027 or so.
Space Force, Helios. Space Force.
The Space Force. Yeah, the Space Force. Oh, my God.
SEAL Team Moon.
Yeah. Maybe we'll be able. Maybe Newt Gingrich will get his wish and he'll commandeer the Space Force, the first Space Force lunar base. Will be commandeered the Newt Gingrich lunar base.
I would actually be frightened to see how we could potentially weaponize being in space.
Well, it's something people have thought about, and it's actually something that people have said for a while that, like, and this is just the United States, like U.S., Russia, China, said way back during the Cold War, like, yeah, okay, so let's all agree no nuclear bombs in space, no kinetic platforms in space, or anything like that. And because everyone agreed, like, yeah, it would be pretty bad if we weaponized space. Now, whether or not we'll stick to that agreement is unknown. I personally don't think it's that likely, but
we promise no bombs, but there's nothing against making a satellite that's actually a super gun that fires giant pieces of metal into the planet.
Well, the Soviets tried to orbit one of those satellites, believe it or not.
Yeah, science fiction calls it a Gauss cannon, but yeah, it's essentially essentially a big space gun.
Yeah. So for real, I'm not actually joking here. Is that the Soviet military launched a couple of space stations that called Almaz that were disguised as the civilian Soyuz space stations, and the Almaz stations actually were equipped with an anti-aircraft gun that could, in theory, be used to shoot down any incoming spacecraft. They test-fired it a couple of times, and I'm not quite sure what happened there, but the stations actually were used to support the invasion of Afghanistan in 1980, but they quickly realized that it was very, very impractical, and so they didn't do too much after that. But in the 80s, they tried launching this satellite called Polyus, which is basically this orbital weapons platform that was designed to basically be like a autonomous orbiting battle station. It had an anti-aircraft gun, it had cameras, even had a prototype laser beam that it could use to shoot at things. But
predecessor to GoldenEye.
Prototype laser beam.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it never really got to do anything because of the vagary. Because I've frequently described the Soviet and Russian space program as basically being a real-life version of the Kerbal Space Program. Because of the nature of the rocket that they launched it on, they had to put the satellite on upside down, and it was supposed to do a 180 when it got to orbit and fire its engines to put it into orbit. Instead, it did a 360, fired its engines the wrong way, and it fell back to Earth. Curse flap. So, yeah.
They're just down all that money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a reason the Soviet Union kind of went bankrupt, is that they spent all that money on that stuff, so yeah. All right. Unless you guys got anything else, I think that's going to do it for this week's broadcast. Sharp, for those who don't know, Sharp will be going on a well-deserved vacation, and we're trying to work out the vagaries of how that's going to work. It may be that Sharp will be joining us from the Florida Keys, hopefully without COVID next week. Maybe. We'll see. Who the hell knows?
I never stop working, not on the things I'm passionate about.
Yes, but the difference is that while we're up here freezing our asses off, you'll be down there in the sunshine and
I'll be sipping pina coladas in the fucking Keys.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully staying away from the COVID as well.
I need a Hawaiian shirt. I need like one of those fucking tourist shirts.
Oh my god, that's great.
Sunglasses. And I just need to like come on here just looking like the biggest douche and then give Gonzo a video of my camera feed.
Oh my god, yeah. So that's what's going to be going on. We could be doing like the Sharpcast on remote next week. If not, it'll just be me and Gonzo and whoever else is here, kind of holding the fort down as we are wont to do whenever Sharp is not with us for whatever reason. We might just do a game stream next week if I can't think of anything else to do, because I've been wanting to do that for some time now, to actually start doing the fucking game streams. And I've been debating as to whether or not to make that as a supplemental to the Sharpcast, or like in place of a typical episode do a game stream. I don't know, but maybe if like next week, and if we come on here and Sharp's laptop's been eaten by a shark or whatever, that's when we might start doing like the BioShock playthrough. I don't know yet. I will talk with people and let everyone know.
I'm genuinely curious how we're getting this one off the ground, because we've discussed a little on it.
Yeah, we've teased it for some time.
We haven't really gotten the time to sit down and like ham out all the details and the complications that could arise.
Yes. All right. Anyway, that's going to do it for us for this week. As always, thank you all so much for listening, for your continued support, and so on and so forth. Yep, we'll be back next week with more details about what's going on in the country and the world, for all the things that you need to be made aware of. And stay positive, test negative, and we will see you all next week. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.